Look at somebody next to you and tell them this message is not for the weak, because when a woman gets healed, not patched, not pretending, not performing, but healed, earth has to rearrange itself to make room for her. I didn't come to whisper today. I didn't come to entertain today. I came to announce something. See, a broken woman may beg. A wounded woman may bleed on everyone around her. But a healed woman, oh, she doesn't chase. She chooses. She doesn't fight for attention. She commands presence. She doesn't explain her worth. She walks in it. When a woman heals, she stops asking for permission to take up space in rooms she was born to dominate. A healed woman is dangerous, not because she destroys, but because she can no longer be controlled. She knows who she is. She knows what she survived, and she knows what she will never tolerate again. So if you came here today still apologizing for your strength, still shrinking your voice, still doubting your calling, this message is about to wake something up inside you. Because when a woman heals, generational cycles break, ceilings shatter, and fear starts packing its bags. A healed woman speaks differently, not louder, clearer, not harsher, truer. Because healing doesn't just touch your heart. iTree programs your mouth. You can always tell where a woman is in her healing by listening to how she talks about herself, about her past, about people who hurt her, and about what she will no longer accept. Before healing, her language is full of apologies. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I hope that's okay. I don't want to be a bother. She shrinks her sentences to make others comfortable. She edits her truth so nobody feels threatened. She softens her needs so she won't be abandoned. She explains herself to people who already decided not to understand her. She keeps talking, hoping clarity will change hearts that were never listening. But healing changes that. When a woman heals, she realizes she doesn't owe access to everyone who asks questions. She learns that explanation is not connection when the listener is committed to misunderstanding her. So she stops over-talking. She stops rehearsing conversations in her head. She stops justifying boundaries to people who benefited from her lack of them. A healed woman doesn't argue with her intuition anymore. She doesn't need a committee to approve what her spirit already confirmed. Her yes becomes intentional, and her no becomes complete sentences. No footnotes, no guilt, no panic. She no longer confuses silence with weakness. Sometimes silence is the loudest declaration of self-respect. Before healing, she spoke from wounds. Every sentence carried pain. Every reaction was defensive. Every disagreement felt like rejection. So she fought too hard, loved too fast, trusted too quickly, and explained too much. She leaked trauma into conversations that required wisdom. She bled on people who didn't cut her because she didn't know how to separate yesterday's hurt from today's moment. But healing teaches her to pause. Now she listens more than she reacts. She responds instead of erupts. She understands that not every thought needs a microphone, and not every emotion deserves the final word. She has learned the power of restraint, not because she is afraid, but because she is disciplined. Her language becomes rooted, grounded, intentional. She stops saying, I'm too much, and starts saying, I'm enough. She stops saying, I'll try, and starts saying, I will or I won't. She stops saying, they made me feel, and starts saying, I choose how I respond. She stops saying, I can't live without, and starts saying, I survived losing. A healed woman no longer romanticizes struggle in her speech. She doesn't glorify pain to prove strength. She doesn't introduce herself through her trauma. Her testimony has wisdom, not bitterness. She can talk about what happened without reliving it. She can mention names without her voice shaking. She can remember without reopening wounds. And here's what really changes. She stops trying to convince people of her value. She doesn't debate her worth. She doesn't negotiate respect. She doesn't explain why she deserves kindness. If she has to explain it, she's already too close. Her language draws lines. She says things like, that doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. I don't feel safe in this conversation. This no longer aligns with who I am. And she says it without raising her voice because healed women don't need volume to have authority. Their certainty speaks for them. Healing also purifies how she speaks to herself. No more self-cursing jokes. No more internal insults disguised as humility. No more replaying failures as identity. She stops calling herself what wounded people named her. She stops agreeing with voices that never had permission to define her. Because once she heals, she understands something sacred. Words are seeds, and she refuses to plant violence in her own soul. She blesses herself with her mouth. She affirms her growth. She honors her progress. She speaks life over her future even when her past still whispers. She has learned that the tongue can either reopen scars or seal them shut, and she chooses healing daily. A healed woman's language carries peace, and peace makes people uncomfortable who thrive on chaos. Some will say she's changed. She has. Some will say she's cold. She's not. She's just no longer bleeding in public. Some will say she's distant. She's not. She's discerning because healing taught her this final lesson. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to correct every lie told about you. You don't have to explain every decision you made to survive. Sometimes the most powerful thing a healed woman can say is nothing at all, and walk away knowing she said enough by choosing herself. There is a moment in a woman's life when she realizes that love should not require her to disappear. Before healing, she calls it patience. She calls it loyalty. She calls it giving grace. But deep down, it is emotional begging, asking to be chosen by people who enjoy the power of withholding. She waits for texts that should already be sent. She overextends, hoping effort will be reciprocated. She stays silent about her needs because she is afraid honesty will cost her connection. Before healing, she negotiates her worth. She says, if I just love harder, they'll stay. If I'm more understanding, they'll change. If I explain myself better, they'll see me. So she pours and pours into empty spaces, convincing herself that exhaustion is the price of love. She keeps lowering the bar, calling it compromise, until she is standing beneath her own dignity. Emotional begging doesn't always look desperate. Sometimes it looks composed. It looks like a woman who has learned how to smile through neglect. It looks like loyalty to people who never show up. It looks like always being available while never being prioritized. It looks like explaining why basic respect matters to someone who benefits from ignoring it. But healing interrupts that cycle. A healed woman recognizes the difference between patience and self-abandonment. She understands that love does not need persuasion. Real connection does not require convincing. She stops chasing clarity from PE, Opal, who thrive on confusion. She stops performing emotional labor for those who refuse responsibility. She stops asking for reassurance from hands that keep letting go. Healing teaches her this hard truth. If someone wanted to show up, they would. If someone valued her presence, she wouldn't have to beg for it. So she stops asking questions that cost her peace. She stops waiting for potential to turn into practice. She stops believing words that are not supported by action. She no longer needs closure conversations that reopen wounds. Her closure is clarity, and clarity doesn't always come from them. Sometimes it comes from walking away. Before healing, she confused longing with love. The ache felt like depth. The inconsistency felt like passion. The emotional highs and lows felt like connection. But healing reveals that chaos is not chemistry, and intensity is not intimacy. She realizes that love should feel safe, not suspenseful. It should feel steady, not uncertain. It should nourish, not drain. A healed woman no longer bargains for affection. She doesn't plead for honesty. She doesn't chase commitment. She doesn't audition for permanence. She understands that if she has to convince someone to choose her, they already haven't. That this is where her power shows up quietly. She leaves conversations where she is talked over. She exits situations where her feelings are minimized. She withdraws access from people who only reach for her when it's convenient, not in anger, not in revenge, but in self-respect. She stops saying, maybe I'm asking for too much, and starts saying, maybe I've been accepting too little. She stops saying, I don't want to lose them, and starts saying, I don't want to lose myself. She stops explaining why she deserves consistency. She expects it, or she moves on. Healing doesn't make her cold. It makes her clear. She can still love deeply, but she no longer loves recklessly. She can still give, but she doesn't give until she's empty. She understands that love is not proven by how much she can endure, but by how well she can be honored. Emotional begging ends when she learns to sit with absence without chasing it. She learns to tolerate loneliness rather than disrespect. She learns that being alone is not the same as being unloved, and that being chosen halfway is far lonelier than standing by herself fully. There is grief in this stage of healing. She mourns the version of herself that stayed too long, tried too hard, and accepted crumbs with gratitude. She forgives herself for the moments she mistook survival for devotion, and instead of shaming herself, she thanks herself for learning. A healed woman knows that her presence is not a favor, it is a gift, and gifts are not thrown at people who don't know how to receive them. So she waits differently now, not anxiously, not desperately. She waits in alignment. She waits with standards. She waits with peace. And if love comes, it meets her standing, never kneeling. She no longer begs to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. Before healing, a woman often calls it being nice. She ignores the quiet discomfort in her spirit. She explains away red flags because she doesn't want to seem judgmental. She gives people the benefit of the doubt, even when doubt is screaming for her attention. She silences her inner warnings because she was taught that intuition is emotional and boundaries are selfish. So she stays longer than she should, trusts quicker than she should, and opens doors that should have remained locked. But discernment is not suspicion, and healing restores it. When a woman heals, her spirit becomes sensitive again.
Not fragile, accurate.
She no longer needs evidence to justify a feeling. She understands that intuition is not fear, it is information. It's the soul picking up signals the mind hasn't yet processed. Healing clears the static caused by trauma, people-pleasing, and self-doubt, allowing her to hear that inner voice without distortion. Before healing, manipulation felt like confusion. She would leave conversations questioning herself instead of the situation. She would apologize for reactions caused by someone else's disrespect. She would take responsibility for emotional climates she didn't create. She didn't realize that manipulation often wears a calm voice and a charming smile. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it flatters. Sometimes it promises. Sometimes it plays the victim. But a healed woman notices patterns, not just moments. She recognizes when words and actions don't align. She senses when affection is being used as leverage. She can feel when kindness has conditions attached to it. And she doesn't need to prove it to anyone else to trust it. Her discernment no longer requires consensus. She understands that peace leaving her body is information enough. Healing sharpens her awareness of energy. She pays attention to how she feels after interactions, not just during them. She notices who drains her and who restores her. She recognizes that laughter can coexist with danger, and charm can coexist with harm. She no longer confuses familiarity with safety. Before healing, she ignored timing. She accepted access too quickly because she feared losing connection. But healing teaches her to move slowly. She watches consistency. She listens beyond compliments. She allows time to reveal character. She understands that manipulation cannot maintain patience, and deception eventually exposes itself when not rushed. A healed woman no longer argues with red flags. She doesn't paint them a different color and call them banners of hope. She doesn't need dramatic proof to justify leaving. Discomfort is enough. Confusion is enough. Repeated disrespect is more than enough. And here is the quiet power of discernment. She doesn't announce it. She doesn't confront every manipulator. She doesn't expose every lie. She doesn't seek validation for her exit. She simply adjusts her distance. She changes how much access people have to her heart, her time, her energy. Discernment teaches her that not everyone deserves an explanation and not every truth needs an audience. Healing also corrects her internal discernment, how she sees herself. She can now tell the difference between conviction and shame. Conviction invites growth. Shame demands punishment. She no longer confuses her mistakes with her identity. She can receive correction without collapsing and feedback without self-hatred. Her inner compass is no longer hijacked by guilt or fear. A healed woman discerns when to speak and when to stay silent. She understands that timing matters. Truth delivered without wisdom can become a weapon. So she waits until her words carry clarity instead of emotion. She chooses peace over proving a point. Not because she is afraid, but because she is secure. She also learns to discern opportunity. She no longer jumps at every open door. She asks, is this aligned? Not just, is this available? Healing gives her the courage to say no to good things so she can say yes to the right things. She understands that every opportunity comes with an assignment, and not every assignment is hers to carry. Discernment makes her dangerous to manipulation because she cannot be rushed, flattered, guilted, or intimidated into abandoning herself. Pressure exposes itself quickly around her. Games lose their power because she refuses to play. People who rely on confusion find her clay, really threatening. And yet she is not hardened. She is open but protected, soft but aware, loving but not naive. Healing has not closed her heart, it has guarded it. She trusts herself now. That is the greatest threat to manipulation. When a woman knows her inner voice is reliable, she stops outsourcing her decisions to opinions, approval, or fear. She stands firm without being rigid. She listens without losing herself. She loves without surrendering her discernment. Because healing didn't just teach her how to see others clearly, it taught her how to see herself truthfully. And a woman who sees clearly cannot be controlled. Before healing, a woman often calls it being nice. She ignores the quiet discomfort in her spirit. She explains away red flags because she doesn't want to seem judgmental. She gives people the benefit of the doubt even when doubt is screaming for her attention. She silences her inner warnings because she was taught that intuition is emotional and boundaries are selfish. So she stays longer than she should, trusts quicker than she should, and opens doors that should have remained locked. But discernment is not suspicion, and healing restores it. When a woman heals, her spirit becomes sensitive again, not fragile, accurate. She no longer needs evidence to justify a feeling. She understands that intuition is not fear, it is information. It's the soul picking up signals the mind hasn't yet processed. Healing clears the static caused by trauma people. Pleasing and self-doubt, allowing her to hear that inner voice without distortion. Before healing, manipulation felt like confusion. She would leave conversations questioning herself instead of the situation. She would apologize for reactions caused by someone else's disrespect. She would take responsibility for emotional climates she didn't create. She didn't realize that manipulation often wears a calm voice and a charming smile. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it flatters. Sometimes it promises. Sometimes it plays the victim. But a healed woman notices patterns, not just moments. She recognizes when words and actions don't align. She senses when affection is being used as leverage. She can feel when kindness has conditions attached to it, and she doesn't need to prove it to anyone else to trust it. Her discernment no longer requires consensus. She understands that peace leaving her body is information enough. Healing sharpens her awareness of energy. She pays attention to how she feels after interactions, not just during them. She notices who drains her and who restores her. She recognizes that laughter can coexist with danger and charm can coexist with harm. She no longer confuses familiarity with safety. Before healing, she ignored timing. She accepted access too quickly because she feared losing connection. But healing teaches her to move slowly. She watches consistency. She listens beyond compliments. She allows time to reveal character. She understands the manipulation cannot maintain patience, and deception eventually exposes itself when not rushed. A healed woman no longer argues with red flags. She doesn't paint them a different color and call them banners of hope. She doesn't need dramatic proof to justify leaving. Discomfort is enough. Confusion is enough. Repeated disrespect is more than enough. And here is the quiet power of discernment. She doesn't announce it. She doesn't confront every manipulator. She doesn't expose every lie. She doesn't seek validation for her exit. She simply adjusts her distance. She changes how much access people have to her heart, her time, her energy. Discernment teaches her that not everyone deserves an explanation and not every truth needs an audience. Healing also corrects her internal discernment, how she sees herself. She can now tell the difference between conviction and shame. Conviction invites growth. Shame demands punishment. She no longer confuses her mistakes with her identity. She can receive correction without collapsing and feedback without self-hatred. Her inner compass is no longer hijacked by guilt or fear. A healed woman discerns when to speak and when to stay silent. She understands that timing matters. Truth delivered without wisdom can become a weapon, so she waits until her words carry clarity instead of emotion. She chooses peace over proving a point, not because she is afraid, but because she is secure. She also learns to discern opportunities. She no longer jumps. She asks at every open door. She asks, is this a line? Not just, is this available? Healing gives her the courage to say no to good things so she can say yes to the right things. She understands that every opportunity comes with an assignment, and not every assignment is hers to carry. Discernment makes her dangerous to manipulation because she cannot be rushed, flattered, guilted, or intimidated into abandoning herself. Pressure exposes itself quickly around her. Games lose their power because she refuses to play. People who rely on confusion find her clarity threatening, and yet she is not hardened. She is open but protected, soft but aware, loving but not naive. Healing has not closed her heart, it has guarded it. She trusts herself now. That is the greatest threat to manipulation. When a woman knows her inner voice is reliable, she stops outsourcing her decisions to opinions, approval, or fear. She stands firm without being rigid. She listens without losing herself. She loves without surrendering her discernment. Because healing didn't just teach her how to see others clearly, it taught her how to see herself truthfully. And a woman who sees clearly cannot be controlled. Before healing, a woman often inherits pain she never chose. She grows up learning how to survive patterns she did not create. She watches silence pass for strength, endurance mistaken for love, and suffering dressed up as sacrifice. She learns what is normal long before she learns what is healthy. So she adapts, she copes, she carries wounds that were handed to her like heirlooms, told to protect them instead of heal them. Generational patterns are subtle. They live in reactions. They hide in expectations. They repeat themselves in relationships, in parenting, in how a woman speaks to herself when she fails. They show up when she tolerates disrespect because the women before her did, when she stays quiet to keep the peace, when she overfunctions because she learned love is proven by exhaustion, when she fears abandonment more than she fears losing herself. Before healing, she thinks this is just life. But healing introduces interruption. At some point, a woman looks at her pain and realizes it didn't start with her, but it does not have to end with her either. She becomes aware that what she normalizes is actually damaging. What she endured was never required. What she repeated was learned, not destined. And that awareness alone is revolutionary. Breaking generational patterns is not loud work. It is lonely work. It means she begins to question what was never questioned. She stops excusing behavior just because it's familiar. She notices how trauma was passed down through silence, through fear, through unspoken rules like don't talk about it, pray and endure. That's just how men are. Or we don't do therapy. She sees how pain was spiritualized instead of healed and how survival was praised more than wholeness. Healing. And she gives her permission to choose differently. She starts responding instead of reacting. She stops exploding where others exploded. She stops abandoning where others abandoned. She sits with discomfort instead of transferring it. She feels emotions that were suppressed for generations and refuses to numb them away. This alone takes courage because when one woman heals, she disrupts systems that depended on her staying unwell. Breaking patterns means she disappoints expectations. She may be called rebellious for setting boundaries, ungrateful for questioning traditions, too sensitive for addressing harm, too much for wanting emotional safety. But healing teaches her that honoring truth will often cost approval and that price is worth paying. She understands that cycles don't break because someone talks about them. They break because someone lives differently. She learns new languages, emotional ones. She learns how to apologize without self-erasure, how to love without control, how to discipline without cruelty, how to nurture without martyrdom. She models regulation instead of rage, presence instead of punishment, accountability instead of avoidance. And when she has children or leads others, this is where the legacy shifts. She doesn't teach fear and call it respect. She doesn't teach silence and call it strength. She doesn't teach survival and call it success. She teaches safety, expression, choice. She allows questions. She welcomes feelings. She gives what she never received, even while healing what she never deserved. Breaking generational patterns also means she grieves. She grieves the childhood she didn't get, the love that came with conditions, the adults who didn't know how to protect her because they themselves were wounded. Healing doesn't deny this grief, it honors it. She learns that acknowledging pain does not equal dishonoring people. Two truths can coexist. They did the best they could, and it still hurt. That clarity frees her from bitterness. She stops trying to punish the past and focuses on redeeming the future. She releases the responsibility of fixing everyone else and commits to changing herself. Not in shame, but in intention. A healed woman becomes a living contradiction to old narratives. Where there was chaos, she cultivates peace. Where there was silence, she invites conversation. Where there was fear, she practices courage. She is not perfect. She still gets triggered. She still has moments where old instincts rise up, but now she notices them. She pauses. She chooses again. And every time she chooses differently, the pattern weakens. Generational curses don't always look dramatic. Sometimes they look like emotional distance, or chronic self-doubt, or choosing unavailable partners, or believing love must hurt. Healing exposes these lies one by one. And here is the most powerful part. She doesn't need permission from the past to evolve beyond it. She honors her lineage by healing it. She respects her ancestors by refusing to repeat what harmed them. She understands that legacy is not what you inherit, it's what you interrupt. So when a woman heals, she becomes the turning point, the line in the story where pain stopped being recycled and started being resolved. And that kind of healing doesn't just change her life, it rewrites generations. Pain tries to convince a woman that it came to end her, that suffering was a sentence, not a season. Before healing, pain feels personal, permanent, and purposeless. It arrives without explanation and overstays its welcome. It takes things, people, dreams, confidence, innocence, and leaves questions behind. And for a long time, she believes the lie that what hurt her has disqualified her. Before healing, pain becomes a hiding place. She shrinks her expectations to avoid disappointment. She lowers her voice so she won't be noticed. She abandons desires that once made her feel alive because wanting feels dangerous now. She tells herself she's fine when she's fractured. She builds an identity around endurance, mistaking numbness for strength. Survival becomes her only goal. But healing reframes the story. Healing doesn't erase pain. It redeems it. It takes what tried to destroy her and teaches her how to stand on it. What once wounded her becomes wisdom. What once silenced her becomes substance. What once embarrassed her becomes evidence that she survived what should have taken her out. A healed woman doesn't deny her pain. She translates it. She learns the language of her wounds. She understands why certain things trigger her, why she guarded herself the way she did, why she stayed, why she left, why she froze, why she fought. Instead of judging herself, she develops compassion, and compassion turns pain into power because it removes shame from the equation. Power does not come from pretending nothing hurt. Power comes from facing it and still choosing to rise. Her pain gives her depth. It gives her discernment. It gives her the ability to read rooms, read people, read moments. She can sense fragility behind bravado. She can recognize silent suffering because she lived there. Her empathy is not theoretical, it's embodied. And yet she does not allow pain to make her bitter. Healing teaches her that bitterness is pain that never found purpose. so she lets pain refine her instead of rot her. She extracts the lesson without reliving the trauma. She keeps the wisdom and releases the wound. The very experiences that broke her heart sharpened her voice. She speaks with authority now, not because she read about struggle, but because she survived it. When she encourages others, her words carry weight. When she sets boundaries, she does so with conviction. When she walks into rooms, she carries resilience in her posture. She knows what it costs her to stand, so she does not take herself lightly. Pain also teaches her resilience. She has already endured what she once thought was unbearable. She has survived endings she thought would end her. She has rebuilt herself from fragments, so fear no longer has the same grip on her. She understands that even if things fall apart again, she knows how to rebuild. That knowledge alone is power. A healed woman stops being afraid of her story. She no longer edits it to make others comfortable. She doesn't overshare, but she doesn't hide. She knows that her story is not an indictment, it's an invitation. An invitation for others to heal, to hope, to believe survival is possible. Her transparency becomes a bridge, not a burden. And here is where pain becomes purpose. She begins to use what she learned to serve, to lead, to create, to protect. She mentors differently. She parents differently. She loves differently. She advocates for boundaries because she knows what it costs to live without them. She stands up for others because she remembers what it felt like to stand alone. Her pain trained her. It trained her endurance. It trained her empathy. It trained her courage. What tried to make her quit taught her how to persist. What tried to make her small taught her how to stand tall. What tried to silence her taught her the value of her voice. Healing does not mean she is never triggered again. It means she is no longer controlled by those triggers. She can feel pain without being consumed by it. She can remember without reliving. She can acknowledge loss without losing herself. Pain no longer defines her identity, it informs her strength. And perhaps the most dangerous thing about a healed woman is this: she is no longer afraid of what she has been through. You cannot threaten her with what she has already survived. You cannot shame her with a story she has already faced. You cannot intimidate her with loss when she knows how to rise from ashes. Her pain did not disqualify her, it qualified her. It forged her resilience, it sharpened her wisdom, it revealed her power, and now she stands, not as a victim of her past, but as evidence that healing can turn even the deepest wounds into the strongest foundations. Before healing, love feels like fire, unpredictable, consuming, and dangerous, yet intoxicating. It burns hot and fast, leaving ashes behind, and she mistakes the intensity for depth. She believes love must be proven through endurance, through sacrifice, through how much pain she can tolerate without leaving. She learns to associate chaos with passion and inconsistency with excitement. Peace feels unfamiliar, even boring, because her nervous system has been trained to respond to turmoil. Before healing, she calls anxiety butterflies. She waits for texts with her heart racing. She replays conversations, searching for meaning in tone and timing. She feels high when attention is given and low when it's withdrawn. She confuses longing with connection and attachment with intimacy. Love feels like something she has to earn, chase, or fix. And because of that belief, she accepts behavior that slowly erodes her sense of self. But healing rewrites the definition. Healing teaches her that love is not adrenaline. It is assurance. It is not chaos. It is consistency. It does not keep her guessing. It brings clarity. A healed woman learns that love should calm her nervous system, not activate her survival instincts. It should feel like safety, not suspense. She begins to understand that intensity is often unresolved trauma seeking familiarity. That what once felt like chemistry was actually her body recognizing chaos it had survived before. Healing separates attraction from alignment. She realizes that just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's healthy. A healed woman stops calling emotional volatility passion. She recognizes that real love does not punish honesty. It does not withhold affection to gain control. It does not make her feel small for having needs. It does not require her to abandon herself to maintain connection. Love does not thrive on power imbalances or silent treatments or emotional guessing games. Healing introduces her to a quieter love, a love that shows up, a love that communicates, a love that listens without defensiveness, a love that remains steady even when emotions fluctuate. At first, this kind of love can feel strange. There are no emotional roller coasters, no dramatic reconciliations, no constant fear of loss. And healing teaches her to sit with that unfamiliar calm instead of running back to chaos. She learns that peace is not the absence of love. It is proof of it. A healed woman no longer confuses attachment with love. She understands that attachment says, I need you to survive, while love says, I choose you while remaining whole. She stops bonding over wounds and starts connecting through values, vision, and mutual respect. Her standards change, not because she is demanding, but because she is discerning. She now pays attention to how love feels in her body. Does it feel safe? Does it feel consistent? Does it feel honest? She understands that attraction without emotional safety is a warning, not a sign. She no longer excuses harmful behavior because of chemistry. She chooses character over charm, effort over promises, presence over potential. Healing also redefines sacrifice. She learns that love does not require self-erasure. Sacrifice in love is mutual, not one-sided. It is chosen, not demanded. It does not cost her identity, voice, or dignity. A healed woman will give, but she will not bleed for love anymore. She no longer stays where she has to beg for basic emotional availability. She no longer tries to heal people who refuse to heal themselves. She understands that love is a partnership, not a rescue mission. And when she loves now, she loves freely, not fearfully. She is not driven by abandonment wounds. She is not controlled by the fear of being alone. She knows that solitude is safer than chaos and peace is better than passion that destroys. This freedom allows her to love without possession, without control, without desperation. Healing teaches her how to receive love. Before, she only knew how to give, overgive, and overfunction. Now she allows herself to be met, to be cared for, to be chosen without performing, to be loved in ways that do not hurt. This requires vulnerability of a different kind, the vulnerability of believing that she deserves gentleness. A healed woman understands that love is not something that wounds you so you can grow stronger. Love is something that nurtures you so you can grow healthier. And perhaps the greatest shift is this. She no longer romanticizes suffering. She no longer believes that pain is proof of depth or that heartbreak is a prerequisite for intimacy. She knows now that love should not cost her peace. So when love comes again, it meets a woman who is whole, a woman who will not confuse chaos with chemistry, a woman who will not accept intensity in place of integrity, a woman who understands that real love does not hurt. It heals. Before healing, a woman often lives fragmented. Pieces of her are scattered across expectations, disappointments, labels, and roles she never consciously chose. She becomes who she needed to be to survive. Strong when she wanted to rest, agreeable when she wanted to resist, silent when she wanted to scream. Over time, she forgets where adaptation ended and identity began. She knows how to function, but she no longer knows herself. Before healing, she introduces herself through performance. She is the reliable one, the strong one, the fixer, the peacemaker. These roles keep her needed, but they also keep her hidden. She confuses usefulness with worth. She believes she is loved for what she provides, not for who she is. And slowly, subtly, she disconnects from her own desires, preferences, and voice. Healing restores what was buried. It brings her back to herself, not the hardened version shaped by trauma, but the original self that existed before disappointment told her to shrink. Healing asks questions she hasn't answered in years. What do you actually want? What do you enjoy? What do you believe separate from what you were taught to tolerate? At first, she may not know the answers. That's part of the loss. Healing often begins with grief for the self she abandoned to survive. She mourns the dreams she postponed, the boundaries she never set, the times she silenced her intuition to keep the peace. But grief becomes a gateway, not a grave. Identity returns in layers. She starts noticing her reactions instead of judging them. She becomes curious about herself. Why does this matter to me? Why does this drain me? Why does this energize me? She learns that her feelings are not inconveniences, they are signals. Her preferences are not selfish, they are information. Healing teaches her that she is allowed to exist without explanation. She no longer needs to justify her personality. She stops apologizing for her depth, her sensitivity, her ambition, her stillness. She understands that identity is not something to earn, it is something to honor. Before healing, she lived in fragments. After healing, she becomes integrated. Her thoughts align with her actions. Her values guide her choices. Her voice matches her inner truth. She no longer says yes with her mouth while screaming no in her spirit. Congruence replaces contradiction. Healing also corrects the false identities imposed on her. She stops calling herself too much when she was simply surrounded by people who needed less. She stops calling herself difficult when she was actually discerning. She stops calling herself weak when she was exhausted from carrying too much alone. She learns to separate who she is from how others reacted to her boundaries. A healed woman understands that identity is not shaped by who stayed or who left. It is not defined by rejection, betrayal, or abandonment. She stops outsourcing her self-definition to relationships that ended in pain. She reclaims authorship of her own story, and with identity restored, confidence changes. Not loud, not performative, not defensive, it becomes rooted. She no longer needs to dominate rooms to feel secure. She doesn't compete for validation. She doesn't explain herself excessively. Her presence becomes enough. She knows who she is, and that knowing stabilizes her. Healing also brings choice. She is no longer driven by old survival instincts. She chooses environments that reflect her values. She chooses relationships that honor her truth. She chooses work that aligns with her purpose. She understands that identity thrives in alignment, not in constant self-betrayal. She stops chasing belonging and starts building it within herself. This doesn't make her rigid. It makes her flexible without losing herself. She can adapt without disappearing. She can compromise without collapsing. She can grow without self-erasure. A healed woman remembers her boundaries not as walls, but as expressions of self-respect. They are declarations of identity. This is who I am. This is how I love. This is what I will not accept. Healing gives her permission to evolve. She releases identities that no longer fit. She outgrows versio of herself without guilt. She understands that growth does not betray the past. It honors it by refusing to remain stuck there. Perhaps the most profound restoration is this. She trusts herself again. She trusts her decisions. She trusts her instincts. She trusts her timing. That trust anchors her identity. She no longer needs constant reassurance because she is no longer divided against herself. A healed woman does not need to prove who she is. She embodies it. And that embodiment is powerful because a woman who knows herself cannot be easily manipulated, silenced, or reshaped to fit someone else's comfort. She stands whole, not because life was gentle, but because healing made her honest. And in that honesty, she finally comes home to herself. Before healing, loss feels like a threat to survival. The thought of losing a relationship, a role, a dream, or a version of life terrifies her because she believes it will leave her empty, exposed, and undone. Loss feels like proof that she is not enough, that she failed, that she will not recover. So she clings, she compromises, she tolerates what hurts because fear convinces her that something painful is better than nothing at all. Before healing, she stays because leaving feels like death. She holds on to people who are inconsistent. She remains loyal to environments that diminish her. She keeps doors open that should have been closed long ago because she is afraid of the silence that follows endings. Loss feels final, and final feels unbearable. But healing transforms her relationship with loss. Healing teaches her that loss is not the opposite of life. It is part of it. That endings are not punishments, they are transitions. She begins to see that many of the things she feared losing were already costing her her peace. What she thought would destroy her was actually slowly eroding her. A healed woman remembers something crucial. She has survived loss before. She has lost people she thought she couldn't live without. She has lost plans that defined her future. She has lost versions of herself she once relied on. And yet, she is still here, breathing, learning, becoming. That realization changes everything. Fear loses its authority when memory returns. She understands now that loss did not break her. It revealed her resilience. It forced her to rebuild, and in rebuilding, she discovered strength she didn't know she possessed. She learned how to adapt, how to stand alone, how to create stability within herself. So when loss threatens her again, it no longer controls her. She does not stay where she is unsafe just to avoid endings. She does not betray herself to keep something that is already gone in spirit. She understands that clinging does not prevent loss. It prolongs suffering. A healed woman stops seeing loss as failure. She sees it as information. If something left, it was either completed, incompatible, or incapable of meeting her growth. She releases the fantasy that everything that ends was meant to last forever. Some things were meant to teach, not to stay. Healing teaches her to grieve without collapsing. She allows herself to feel sadness without interpreting it as weakness. She mourns honestly without rushing the process or numbing the pain. But she no longer lets grief convince her that she will never love again, trust again, or hope again. She knows grief has an expiration date, even when it feels endless, and here is where fear truly breaks. A healed woman realizes that the worst has already happened, and she survived it. She has been abandoned and still found herself. She has been disappointed and still discovered new dreams. She has been broken and still rebuilt. Loss no longer holds the same power because it has lost its mystery. She knows what it feels like, and she knows it passes, so she begins to live differently. She speaks her truth without fear of who might leave. She sets boundaries without fear of rejection. She chooses herself without fear of abandonment because she understands that what leaves when she is honest was never meant to stay. Healing also teaches her abundance. She no longer believes that love is scarce or that opportunities only come once. She trusts that what is aligned will find her again or be replaced by something better. She stops hoarding our relationships out of fear and starts honoring connections that are mutual and life-giving. This freedom changes her energy. She is no longer desperate, no longer clinging, no longer afraid to walk away, and that is dangerous because fear is what kept her small. A healed woman does not threaten people with her absence. She simply removes herself when necessary. She does not beg for loyalty. She chooses alignment. She does not fear endings because she understands that every ending has made room for her becoming. Loss taught her how to let go. Healing taught her that letting go does not mean losing herself. It means choosing herself. And perhaps the most powerful shift of all is this: she no longer needs guarantees to move forward. She trusts herself enough to handle whatever comes next. Whether things stay or leave, she knows she will remain. A woman who is no longer afraid of loss is no longer controlled by fear. She is free to love fully, live boldly, and choose honestly, because she knows that even if everything falls apart, she has already proven she knows how to rise.